New Mexico, New Jersey, crystal meth, gabagool. Long before Walter White was cooking that blue stuff in the deserts of New Mexico, Tony Soprano was running the organized crime ring in North Jersey. Thanks to Tony's exploits as the crime boss of Jersey, it paved the way for Walter to suit up in his yellow hazmat gear. They're two of the greatest television characters, nay, greatest characters in pop culture, period. Richly layered and utterly fascinating to watch, but which will be the ultimate crime kingpin and which will get whacked?
Are you ready?
It's a battle of the anti-heroes here on Face Off.
Disclaimer. No actual science was used to determine the outcome of Face Off. Your results may vary. Please do not consume Face Off if you are allergic to conjecture, opinion, or general nonsense.
Round 1. Family. At the end of the day, after all the heinous acts they commit, these two love to portray themselves as family men. For Tony, there's his wife Carmela, his daughter Meadow, son AJ, and mother Livia. His relationship with Carm has its fair share of ups and downs, to say the least. He cheats on her constantly with mistresses and occasional flings until she reaches her breaking point, even kicking him out of the house before reconciling. His dynamic with his kids is very dysfunctional at times. He seems closer with Meadow and at other points closer with AJ. Everyone in his family is cognizant of Tony's true nature, even if they pretend that he merely works in waste management. It's not unusual for Tony to snap at his family and alienate them with his behavior, yet he very much does love them. He shows this by attending his children's sporting events and does all he can to provide for them. He also hopes that both his kids will escape the life of crime he has led and ensures that they have the opportunities to do so. There's also his sister Janice, who gets on his nerves constantly. The White family consists of Skyler, his wife, his son Walt Jr., or Flynn, depending on which mood you catch him in, and starting in season 2, little baby Holly comes into the picture. There's also Walt's sister-in-law Marie with a penchant for all things purple and her husband Hank, who just so happens to work for the DEA. Skyler senses something is off with Walt pretty much once he starts cooking that crystal. In season 3, she kicks him out of the house once she deduces that he's a drug dealer, but she eventually comes around and slowly involves herself in his criminal activities. Until the second half of the final season, Hank and Marie have zero clue who their brother-in-law truly is. Walt Jr. doesn't even find out until almost the very end of the series. Once the truth comes out, he essentially shuns his father and never wants to see him again.
Just die already. Just die.
Oof. By the end of Breaking Bad's run, Walt loses his family completely, ostensibly the reason he started doing this all in the first place. At least Tony still had his fam till the very end. Verdict: Tony Soprano.
All I know is you never had the makings of a varsity athlete.
Round 2, crime family. Sure, these two have their real families, but they're nothing without their crime family. For Mr. Soprano's inner circle, there's Silvio, Tony's right-hand man and consigliere, the impulsive Polly Walnuts with one of the best nicknames ever, his Uncle Junior, who's the official boss of the DeMeo crime family for most of the series, his longtime friend Big Pussy, who unfortunately for Tony turns out to be an FBI informant, and Chrissy, who he treats as a son in many ways, but they're not technically related and kill people together, so that's why he falls under this category. Sure, there are many more members of the crime syndicate that join the family in later seasons, but we'd be here all day rattling them off.
We understand each other?
For Walt, there's his former student turned partner in crime, Jesse Pinkman, the always reliable Mike Ehrmantraut, who becomes Walt's fixer in later seasons, and Saul Goodman, a crooked strip mall lawyer who acts as a consigliere to Walt and Jesse. The character of Saul was so good, he even received a spin-off show that rivals Breaking Bad. There's also Jesse's pals, Skinny Pete Badger and Combo, who provide a lot of the comic relief. We could also count Gail Bedecker, since he really only had feelings of admiration for Walt's genius. Lastly, there's the late Robert Forster's and a vacuum repairman with a secret side business as a new identity specialist who helps Walt escape when his web of lies comes crashing down. While Walt and Jesse's electrifying odd couple dynamic can't be beat, Tony's associates are simply more trustworthy than Heisenberg's, and that's really saying something. Verdict: Tony Soprano.
Just when they thought I was out, they pull me back in.
Round 3, humanity. Don't get us wrong, both of these dudes are bad hombres, yet they're still three-dimensional beings with redeemable qualities. Tony may be a cold-blooded killer, but he's also a man who understands that he needs help. Help in the form of therapy for his depression and panic attacks. He cares deeply about his family, including his mother and Uncle Junior, who conspired to whack him, but he decides not to take any action against him. And we've already covered the ways that he is actually a loving father.
You're handsome and smart and a hard worker.
He really takes great pride in his daughter Meadow's achievements, even going as far as to be moved to tears by her performance at a choir recital. Not only that, Tony is an animal lover and enjoys feeding the ducks who frequent his pool. I mean, check out Tony's reaction during Chrissy's intervention upon hearing that he accidentally suffocated Adriana's dog.
I'm gonna suffocate you, you little prick.
Or when he suspects Ralph Cifaretto of killing his racehorse in a fire for insurance money. We've even seen him display feelings of guilt over certain actions, especially the murder of his close friend, Big Pussy. Also, Tony loves his gabagool and his orange juice. Just be sure to not put too much pulp in it.
Not this much. I like the one that says some pulp.
In Walt's case, he'd much rather start slinging methamphetamines before stepping foot in a therapist's office. However, that doesn't mean he completely acts without empathy and sympathy. Similar to Tony, Walt cares about his family more than anything, going as far as offering up his giant stash of cash just to save Hank's life. He shows signs of guilt, specifically over his role in the death of Jane, manifesting in the form of a fly, and even treats his partner Jesse as a surrogate son. In the very first episodes, Walt does everything he can to avoid having to murder Domingo, aka Crazy 8, until he's left no other choice. Sure, the later on we get in Breaking Bad, the more those traits will become in short supply, but the man clearly has a conscience, even if it's hard to notice with the subsequent moral decline. That said, if we had to choose one of these guys to go have a beer with, it'd have to be Verdict, Tony Soprano.
It's a stereotype, and it's offensive.
Round 4, Villainy. Of course, these two wouldn't be considered anti-heroes if they didn't make their fair share of appalling choices. It goes without saying that Tony's lifestyle choices already give him a head start in this category, as he's been entrenched in crime for the better part of his life. Then there's Tony's infamous rage.
Now who came in here and ate my shit?
One of the most brutal examples involves New York mobster Coco Cogliano, who makes a suggestive remark to Meadow while drunk. This results in Tony tracking him down, viciously pistol whipping him and curb stomping Coco, breaking off several teeth while leaving him alive. There's also the notable murder of Chrissy, which he feels completely justified in, despite the hurt to the entire family. Tony also appears to be a bigot, with his prejudice showing towards Meadow's first college boyfriend, who is of black and Jewish ancestry.
Charcoal briquette, a moulignon.
What's your problem?
I think you know what my problem is.
Lastly, the idea that Tony potentially used therapy as a way to improve his skills in manipulating others and learn to become a more capable criminal, which is why Dr. Melfi cuts their relationship off in the final season. So yeah, Tony's not exactly Mr. Rogers. Remember how conflicted Walt was over having to kill Crazy 8 in Season 1? That was a far cry compared to how easily he dispatched people who got in his way down the line, including poor Gale. The only real time Walt shows restraint to murder is when Jesse turns on him in the final season. Walt was vehemently against the idea of killing his former partner until he felt he had no choice. However, once he learns about his involvement with Hank and the DEA and the resulting consequences, Walt rats out his hiding place before twisting the knife and revealing that he watched Jane die. There's also the far-reaching implications of how much death and pain Walt has caused thanks to his meth empire. And did we mention the fact that he poisoned a child as part of a scheme to lure Jesse back to his side in order to defeat Gus? Verdict, Walter White.
I am the one who knocks.
Round 5, Enemies. For two guys, they sure make a lot of enemies. To start, Tony has infighting with his crime family, infighting with his real family, including Uncle Junior, his mother Livia, and even Carmela, the New York mob that conspires to whack him at various points, and of course, the law, who Tony always seems to be one step ahead of. For Walt, he's occasionally at odds with Skyler, and Jesse gets on the brutal Salamanca family's radar in a bad way With the cousins swearing vengeance over Walt's part in Tuco's death, Gus Fring, who starts out as an ally but turns on Walt once he proves to be a liability, Jack and his neo-Nazi gang for killing Hank and stealing his barrels of money, and arguably Walt's biggest nemesis, his own DEA brother-in-law Hank, who Walt manages to stay one step ahead of until he leaves an incriminating poetry book in the wrong spot at the wrong time. Talk about dropping bombs. Tony's enemies are formidable for sure, but none are quite as iconic or brilliant as the ones Walt comes up against. Verdict? Walter White.
Maybe your best course would be to tread lightly.
Round 6. Character arc. Both characters possess some of the richest character development in television history, even if their trajectories are quite different. With Walter, creator Vince Gilligan set out to transform a character from Mr. Chips to Scarface, and the results work wonderfully. When we meet him in the pilot, Walt's mild-mannered nature is slowly shattered once he's given a lung cancer diagnosis. Turning to manufacturing meth in order to secure his family's finances, Walt soon discovers he has a knack for this line of business. Over the course of the series, Walt breaks bad in incrementally bigger ways until he reaches his place at the top of his meth empire. Walt's fatal flaw will always remain his hubris, as he had the chance to swallow his pride back in season 1 with his former colleagues offering him work in order to get the money and the medical treatment he desperately needed. Obviously, Walt didn't go that route, and the rest is history. While Walter ends up as a full-blown villain by the end of his run, Tony had become an unsavory type long before we meet him on screen. In fact, Tony doesn't appear to change much, at least on the surface. Over the course of the series, he becomes enlightened and less blind to his own evil through the aid of therapy, but it seems to make him more selfish, in denial, and an emotional shell of the person we met back in season 1. That said, T's character arc of going from bad to worse is not nearly as compelling as Walt's drastic transformation from Ned Flanders to Michael Corleone. Verdict: Walter White.
We've got work to do.
Round 7. Kill counter. As a tiebreaker, let's see which has the higher kill counter. For fairness, we're only judging based upon what's depicted in the series itself. Passing mentions of murders not depicted on screen won't count here. Sorry, Tony.
Fuck you!
For Mr. Soprano, there's Willie Overall, Febby Petrulio, Chucky Senior, Matthew Bevilacqua, his best pal Big Pussy, Ralph Cifaretto, Tony Blundetto, and Chrissy Moltisanti. All directly died by his hand. We'll also include deaths that he ordered or was involved with secondhand, including Jimmy Altieri, Mikey Palmis, Philip Parisi, Barry Haydu, Stanley Johnson, Credenzo Curtis, Jack Massaroni, Rene LeCour, Phil Leotardo, and of course, for Adriana. In total, for Walt, he directly killed Emilio, Crazy 8, the 2 rival dealers. One ran over with his Pontiac Aztec, and the other shot in the head. 2 of Gus's henchmen, Mike Ehrmantraut, Lydia Rodar Quayle from Rice and Poisoning, 6 of Uncle Jack's guys, not to mention Uncle Jack himself. He was also indirectly responsible for the deaths of Gail Bedecker, Gus Fring, and Tyrus from the bomb he supplied Hector Salamanca. Gus's 10 former employees behind bars, who were murdered by Jack Welker's gang on Walt's orders, Andrea Cantinello by revealing her relationship to Jesse and her location, Hank Schrader, and Steve Gomez. There's also his decision not to save Jane Margolis from her asphyxiation due to heroin, which led to her father, Donald, accidentally causing the crash of Wayfarer 515 and JM21, resulting in the deaths of all 167 passengers aboard. So, in total, that's 198 people. Damn, Mr. White. Verdict: Walter White. Winner: Walter White.
Goddamn right.
Say his name! This was a tough decision, as it's almost impossible to crown a champion between these 2 titans of TV. While Tony will always be considered the first likable anti-hero in television, there's no denying the staying power that Walter White has. Look no further than this past year's Super Bowl commercial. And that's not even his first rodeo.
Hi.
Hi.
But don't let us have the final word. Tell us in the comments which iconic television anti-hero is your favorite, Tony Soprano or Walter White. And as always, thanks for watching, bitch.